Another step in machining rough stock in preparation for assembly of your project or just cutting parts to length is cross-cutting. And in this shop we use the double bevel sliding compound miter saw. Now it's a complicated name, but usually these tools are known as chop saws because we chop pieces to length. We can use this tool for any piece of material that's 12 inches in width or less. Okay, so that means that we can get a full 12-inch cut out of this saw. This tool will cut your stock to length either with square ends or with any kind of bevel or miter that you might need on it. It's a really versatile tool. To begin with, you want to inspect your stock, okay, to make sure it's going to be safe to cut on the saw. And just like on some of the other machine tools that we use, we want to inspect the wood for either twist or crook. And the way we do that is by setting it down on a flat surface and seeing if it spins on a high spot or if there's any gaps apparent underneath it when it's lying on the flat surface. Now you can see that this piece here has definitely got some bow into it like that, and if I touch the corners and it rocks, I can tell it's a little bit twisted. So I'm going to have to watch out for that. This piece is pretty short. If I wanted to face join it to get some of that twist out of there, I'm going to end up with less than the thickness of the material that I need for the job. So I'm going to try and cut this piece to length without machining the face of it in the joiner. To begin with, inspect your stock for twist or crook. That's where the board is either twisted in this direction, or it's got some shape to it this way, or it's got some bow in it like this. On this tool, when we're cutting a twisted or bowed piece of wood, we want the belly of the board down on the table at the point of cut. That's so that when we make a cut and the blade completes the cut, the two halves of the board are going to fall apart and they won't pinch the blade. If I had this up like this and we've got some space under it at the point of cut, when I complete the cut, that board's going to close down on the blade and pinch it, and it might stop the blade. You might ruin the saw. You'll definitely ruin your workpiece when you're doing that. Okay, so I've got the belly down. Once I've got the material on the bench, I want to mark it for length. Okay, and I usually mark on the outside edge here so that I'll be able to line the saw blade up with my cut mark. So I go ahead and I lay this out. I need an 18-inch long board. I want to make sure I know which side of the pencil line I'm going to cut to, so sometimes I might make a little mark on that side of the cut line. So I've got it marked out, and then I want to line the workpiece up with the blade. Okay? I can see that I'm a little off to the right, so I'm going to slide the workpiece in. Okay? Now I'm lined up with my cut mark and I'm ready to go. This saw, being able to make this large width of cut, you've got to slide it all the way out. With any size piece, you want to slide that saw out past the perimeter of the board, pull the trigger, let it wind up, and then lower the blade into the table and push the saw through the workpiece. And you want it to be all one smooth motion. Now when I hold the workpiece down with my left hand, I want to make sure that my hand isn't anywhere more than or less than maybe about 6 inches from the line of cut, because I don't want to take any chances on cutting any of my fingers off, because this will go through it like butter. Okay, so I could be holding it here. You got to be careful you're not too far out, or you're going to push that piece of wood out like that. You won't get your square cut or whatever cut you laid out on the board. So, just like all the other power tools, up against the fence, down against the table. Okay? I'm pushing down on the upper corner. If I have to, I can hook under it with my thumb so I can give it a little downward twist to make sure it's tight against the table. So I got it here. I'm more than 6 inches away from the line of cut. Of course, I got to be lined up. Now, that's the other thing about safe tool use, is you have to be totally focused and put your total attention on your work. I'm busy here trying to talk and give instruction at the same time, so I may get distracted. If I cut my fingers off, let me know. Okay? So here I go. I'm holding the workpiece down. I draw the saw all the way out, pull the trigger, one smooth cut. Okay, you notice I released the trigger after I completed the cut and let the blade come to a complete stop. The reason I want to do that is if my blade's still buried in the work and it's spinning, when I lift it up with that spinning blade, it may catch the workpiece, the offcut, and kick it up. Or it could try and suck it between the fence. It rattles all over the place. Sometimes it kicks back at you. You might ruin your workpiece and you might ruin the blade. Okay? So we're going to go through that one more time. We'll do it with a different piece of wood this time. Here we got a 4x4. The dimension's quite a bit more. Now, this saw can handle this cut. You notice we got about 3.5 inches here. As long as the arbor on the saw will clear the workpiece, then the saw is capable of making the cut. We may not want to do it all in one pass, though. This is a pretty short piece of wood. I got to watch out I got enough to hold on to before I make the cut. So here I go. I mark out my workpiece. And in this case, I probably want to cut the funky end of the board off first. Okay, so I'm measuring from the square end. I want to end up with a 12-inch piece. All I need is a little mark, and I know I'm cutting on this side of the line. Now you're going to notice me taking several passes to make my way through this thick piece so that we're not pushing the saw too hard. We don't want it to bind in there or bog down. So I draw the saw out, pull the trigger, let it wind up, and start taking my passes. Okay, so that's how you'd cut through a large dimension piece of wood, and you get a nice smooth cut. Let's show you an example of cutting a 12-inch wide piece of stock. Okay, so here we've got, what is that? That's 12 inches wide. Can you imagine that? Okay, piece of whiteboard. Okay, show you how we can complete a full 12-inch cut. There's something else you got to keep in mind. Some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed. The normal operation of this saw is to hold down with your left hand and to make the cut with your right. In some situations, you may be wanting to cut some off of this end of the material. It may be super long, and you don't want to have to spin it around, and you want to make the cut on this end of the board. Well, it doesn't mean you're holding down with your left and cutting with your right, because you can imagine what will happen. Okay? You never cross your arms or your hands when you're attempting to make a cut on the chop saw. Okay? So if I wanted to complete this cut with the board in this situation, I'd hold with my right. I still have the 6-inch clearance between my hold down hand and the line of cut, and I'd make the cut with my left hand. Okay? Okay, I'm way out here at this edge so I can line the cut up. I need 28 inches for this particular cut. I mark the side of the line that I want to cut to. You notice I don't have to draw a line on my workpiece because this saw is set up square to the fence. It'll make a square cut every time. So I just have to line my cut up. Okay. Now, if you don't know if you're lined up with your cut mark or not, you can always cut a little bit outside of the line, or where you think it is. Take your first cut. Okay, and we can see I still got about an 1/8 inch of material here before I reach my cut mark. But at least I've got enough on there that I can always cut it down. It's harder to stretch a board than it is to shrink it. So we'll put that guy back in there. In order to set this cut up, we'll just bring the blade down without pulling the trigger, butt the board up against it. I know where the saw blade's going to be. Okay, so then I'm going to move it over maybe another 1/16 of an inch, and we'll take our next cut. Okay, I can see I've still got about a 32nd of an inch that I want to take off. Lower that blade, butt the board up against the blade. The width of the carbide teeth that are brazed to the end of the saw blade are going to take that 32nd of an inch off. Okay, we've seen some standard cross cuts with a resulting 90-degree angle on the end of the board, but the name of the saw implies that it can do other things. The double bevel sliding compound miter saw. Okay, the sliding part is the slide. Now when you want to cut a double bevel, that's an angle like this, and maybe an angle like that, or an angle like that. So we're going to show you how that happens. Say I want a 15-degree angle on the end of the board with a 10-degree bevel. I'm going to set the saw head to 15 degrees. Okay, I'm going to release the bevel switch here and tilt it over to 10 degrees. Where is 10 degrees? 10 degrees. Secure the head. So now I've got a slightly tilted and beveled cut going on. Again, you want to make sure you got at least 6 inches between your hand and the line of cut. Up against the fence, down against the table. Draw the saw out, pull the trigger, one smooth motion. Okay, so you can see here, we've got a really slight 10-degree bevel on there, and then a 15-degree miter. Okay, you guys know what a miter is, a picture frame, 45-degree cuts. You set this guy over to 45 degrees. And the beauty of the saw is it'll go 50 degrees in one direction and 60 degrees in another. And then you can go all the way over to 45 in both aspects like this. So I got to set it back to 0. And you'll recognize this joint. It's your 45-degree miter. That's how you make a picture frame.